They might be incredibly fun, and I can definitely think of friendships from my more hedonistic days, clubbing days, where those friendships were all about what we could get up to at the weekend. And they were incredibly entertaining, full of life, full of beans, disco beans.
Some of these things are ephemeral and they may last months or years, but they are not always enduring forever, right?
So other forms of toxic relationship may where you might feel drained by just the very presence of being in that person's company. You walk away from that and think, I just feel worse from being in that person's space. I'm not feeling buoyed and enlivened by that experience.
The problem with many of these interactions is they happen because they're triggered. Like, oh, fucking hell, here you go again. You're fucking late. You're always fucking late. You're a bit of a twat.
We don't have to be dicks, do we? We might well be irked by another's behaviour, but I don't think in making them feel worse about it, we're doing anyone any favours.
I said to her that what I'd done is, as if it were a film shot on celluloid, I had edited out all the bad bits and I was left with a very short film. We were talking last time about friendships, and we talked about these different orbits that people are on. Sometimes they're in real close proximity, and we might even call people best friends or closest friends. We also talked about these wonderful relationships that we have that are brought together or brought about because of a common interest, whether that be running, skateboarding, football, music, or whatever it might be. And that some of that is tribal and primeval, and that actually we respond well to being together. And it's really good for our positive mind-body health, not just individually, but collectively. We also talked about that some friendships are seasonal and that they may be intense and beautiful for a moment and for a season, but then may move into different phases, and that is natural and normal too as we travel through life. We mentioned toxic relationships. Sometimes relationships don't always go well with friends, right?
Yeah, not every friendship is balanced and equal and supportive and caring. They might be incredibly fun, and I can definitely think of friendships from my more hedonistic days, clubbing days, where those friendships were all about what we could get up to at the weekend. And they were incredibly entertaining, full of life, full of beans, disco beans. And as a consequence of that, they could also be quite edgy at times, often the following day, or in transaction of who's purchased this weekend's product that we're going to sample. So yeah, there are definitely friendships that I look back on and thought that was wonderful for that season, but actually stopped serving me. And it was quite clear that this wasn't a friendship I wanted to take any further, because my life was more than just clubbing. My life was more than just going and getting off my face. But for those friends, it was only about that. That's what they lived and slept occasionally for. Whereas actually that wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted to lead.
And that's where you are evolving, and the edge where you met changes, and it no longer can be perpetuated. It's simply that we are mismatched. And I think that it is right that we celebrate those relationships and say that they were wonderful while they lasted, and then let them go. And, you know, they may come round again in a different context where we might meet again and be nostalgic. But some of these things are ephemeral and they may last months or years, but they are not always enduring forever, right?
No, and I think we can swing from friendship branch to friendship branch, and as one friendship perhaps maybe finishes, you might move into a different phase in your life, a new job, a new location, a new pastime, and perhaps there is a chance to grab another friendship branch.
Yep.
There will be friendship branches that last for a very, very long period of time and can exceed perhaps those earlier experiences. And I can certainly think of a couple of friends of mine that have lasted the duration of time from those early hedonistic clubbing days that are still part of my life, but that we don't have that part of our relationship anymore. We still appreciate music. I still dance, they don't. And the two guys I've got in mind here are completely sober now. And so that level of relationship, the idea of them going to a club, one in particular who I had this conversation with recently, I go sober clubbing now, but one of my friends in particular was like, the thought of dancing sober, you're nuts. I can't even think of anything worse than that. So it's really interesting how much that person's moved on in their life and their interest now.
Yeah, I understand. It is also true that sometimes relationships just go bad with friends. That we're going to fall out over something circumstantial, philosophical, something may happen that triggers this, or it just may be that there's an erosion of, like in the last episode, we talked about the single word that we might attribute to someone momentarily, just for the convenience of that conversation. We talked about, okay, this is a trustworthy person, and maybe that core DNA of that relationship becomes challenged circumstantially, and then it can potentially move into a quite abusive phase. And so even though we are still bound potentially by proximity, by ritual, with both the members of the same club or whatever it might be, there's this real heat in the friction between us. And I think it can start as potentially complex, difficult, awkward, uncomfortable, and then move towards what we conveniently label as a toxic relationship. Do you have examples of that in your own life, Karl? And what's your experience of that?
Yeah, I think there are a number of different potentials for a toxic relationship, aren't there? You know, perhaps where there is an abuse of trust, perhaps something's broken down, whether that's something that was said in secret or in trust, in faith, and perhaps that was not carried through. There might be transactions where it's more heavily weighted on one side of that friendship, where perhaps the level of contact isn't necessarily balanced or feeling fair, for whatever reason that might be. So other forms of toxic relationship may where you might feel drained by just the very presence of being in that person's company. You walk away from that and think, I just feel worse from being in that person's space. I'm not feeling buoyed and enlivened by that experience.
Yeah, the mood hoovers.
Yeah.
Where it's not in the positive column of the pros and cons. Even though you might love that person and love aspects of that relationship, the shadow is a drain, and you come away as a consequence just feeling a little less or a little smaller rather than a little lighter and a little more.
Boundaries, I think, are really important in a friendship as well. Having healthy boundaries can lead to a very healthy relationship. I think when those boundaries become a little bit blurred or even abused and stepped over, that's when I think that's an important point of asking that relationship, can those boundaries be reinstated? Or actually has that boundary been overstepped too much or too severely that there is no return from that relationship?
And then you get to this possible inflection point where you consider, or I have considered in my relationship, okay, this is not healthy for me. I think sometimes the other party would be not negligent of something, but completely oblivious to the fact that I'm having an issue, because I have not sort of put it on the table and had the confidence to have a conversation with that person to say, okay, there's something I'd like to discuss. Many of us are not good at those confrontational conversations, right?
No, because it means being honest with ourselves, and I think that can be a real challenge sometimes as well, can't it? Mm-hmm. That I have my needs are not being met here, or a boundary's been overstepped, and that makes me feel a certain way. But then I have to admit to feeling a certain way and name that feeling.
Yeah.
And then try and look at that with a little bit of perspective and go, why did that happen? What has shifted to allow me to feel very different about that? And no, we're not very good at that at all, and particularly not as men.
Because the mirror turns back towards ourselves. And it will always be, as a consequence, as much about ourselves as it is about the interaction. There are ways to begin to have conversations that are deeply uncomfortable, such as we avoid confrontation. The whole system of nonviolent communication helps in this context. It's brilliant in the world of work, and I think we might have even touched on it back in those podcasts. But here it can be particularly helpful. What I try to do often is remove the behavior from the identity of the person. So it's not that you are a dick. It's that your behavior is suboptimal, in my opinion. You may not agree. We can agree to disagree. Similarly, I can only tell you about my feelings, not your feelings. So the whole way that system works is, first of all, start with a fact. Karl, you are habitually late. You're not, but let's say, for example, you are habitually late. And as a consequence, I feel that you disrespect my time. This particular example is pretty light in compared to full toxicity in a relationship, right? But let's just use it for the time being. I would prefer to feel this, and so therefore can I suggest these actions? What we're doing there is not saying that you are not punctual or that you are disrespectful. It is that there's a behavior that I recognize, which may or may not be one that you recognize, that is making me feel a particular way, and I would prefer to not feel it, and can we work through that together? That framework is somewhat less confrontational. What I would suggest, if anyone's going to use these types of techniques, is to practice on a friend. Just see how it goes. Practice with a partner. Go, oh, I've heard this thing on a podcast. Why don't we try this thing? But similarly, prepare. The problem with many of these interactions is they happen because they're triggered. Like, oh, fucking hell, here you go again. You're fucking late. You're always fucking late. You're a bit of a twat. And not being prepared for, where it's like, okay, would it be convenient for you to have a conversation about an aspect of our relationship that I'm finding difficult, that you might be oblivious to, right? Can be a useful framework.
It's a massively useful framework. I've got another framework which we can work and give another example of. You've got to take yourself and your emotion out of that, haven't you? It's very easy for us to be explosive. For fuck's sake, you're late again. You're always late. And then we make a very sweeping statement that is probably not accurate. But in that moment, caught up in that moment, that is the projection that we have of that particular individual.
Exactly. To that single word.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Karl. Yeah, he's the late guy.
There's that label.
Yeah. The relationship starts to move towards tolerance. And then there's going to become a point where I just can't tolerate this anymore. Now, this is a light set of circumstances. Yeah. Toxicity can go far deeper, where it can actually become abusive. Again, that may not actually be the other person. It may be simply a reaction within ourselves which no longer serves us. It may be little or nothing to do with the other. I've been in a situation like this where I had a brief but very deep, close relationship with a friend. But that relationship became, I'll use the term, certainly less positive for me and potentially toxic, but not necessarily because of anything that individual was doing, but my reaction to the interactions. That's the work for me to do in my shadow. It is not always that the other person is wrong or able to even adapt. It might be that this is something that is deep rooted within ourselves, which just means that attachment is not going to be able to be sustained.
It's a really good point, isn't it? Because it's not, we might blame we might blame our partners, we might blame our boss, we might blame the person serving us in the shop, we might blame that friend for them. They are the reason I am feeling this way. But very, very likely there is, and I'll start to introduce this now, there is a part inside us that is being triggered by that, and maybe our actions are triggered by that particular situation or that person. So we might say that there is a part of that person, part of me is not good at timekeeping. And that part of me that's not good at timekeeping is agitating and irritating a part of you. So what we then start to do is we break down and we don't whitewash me as being always late and just being that shit timekeeper. And we don't whitewash your response to me as always being agitated with my behavior around timekeeping. But there is a part of me that, and maybe it only shows up when I see you. Mm-hmm. For some reason, that part of me has a certain behavior and that triggers a certain response in you. Yeah. So we break ourselves down into multiple different parts, and we can see ourselves as a collection of these parts and a collection of our habits and our behaviors. And so that, again, is another avenue into a conversation that we might then say, well, that there's part of you, part of your behavior that is triggering a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
We're breaking down what we would have as a normal conversation between mates, and we're certainly taking the emotional charge out of it. We're not saying it's me that's fucked off with you. We're saying that there is an element of your behavior that irks an element of my response to that as well.
Yeah, because we use these terms like toxic relationships so broadly and so often used, that can become difficult because it's like, oh, that's just a toxic person, which is not necessarily true. It might be that it's a toxic behavior demonstrated by a person. And so that is about you over there. Then there's the bit between us, which is because of our interactions, there's a toxicity. But actually, it may also be that it's within me and that is inner work that needs to be done. It might be that my reaction to punctuality is something to do with probably the way I was nurtured that becomes a problem. My mother was perpetually late, always late. We were always late for everything. So for years, I was always late for school. And that comes with sort of punitive measures that the school puts in place. Right, we're not talking like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm talking like 25 minutes, 45 minutes late for school often. And we know that environment is quite unforgiving for young people because then, you get given a label. And so maybe my relationship with punctuality is nothing to do with you. And actually, I could tolerate it completely if I had resolved the relationship that was to the one with a parent. And again, I mean, that relationship with punctuality is actually true and true of my mother, but not true of you, just to be clear. But there may be reasons that this is actually my toxic challenge. It's not toxic overall. But because we use the term so loosely, it can sometimes be misunderstood.
So much easier to blame other.
Yeah.
You're the problem in this relationship. You've done this. Mm-hmm. I am fine. I am perfect exactly as I am. I don't need to change or to pivot at all. I think if a friendship is worthwhile, if a relationship that we might call a friendship is worthwhile saving, is worthwhile the effort and the energy required, I think that it requires us to have a slightly different standpoint on that relationship as well, doesn't it? It doesn't... perhaps it doesn't need to be toxic. It might be worth saving, or it might be worth just saying, actually, I don't think this is serving me anymore.
Yeah, and then we get to endings. You're absolutely right. There will oftentimes be an opportunity for recovery. I've got a great friend who, one of the many things I love about him is that he can challenge our relationship and my behaviors, but he does it in a really positive way. Not only is he a skilled coach, but he's incredibly diplomatic and delicate, but he is very capable of sort of going, okay, this is something that we need to discuss. And as a consequence, we've built up this muscle between us, which is like, it's okay for us to say this, like you're being a bit of a dick, or this is a behavior that I'm finding difficult to manage, and we work through it. And that's been done over constant communication, positive communication. It can become easier when it becomes the culture of the relationship, but there will come a point in some where there are endings. Now that can either be explosive, fuck you, I can't stand this any longer, I'm out. And those can be deeply painful and scars that can remain for many, 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 many years. If not, they become indelible. But also there are positive ways to end relationships. Can you think of any tips and tricks, Karl, for, I was going to say happy endings, but a positive ending, even though our paths have to be divergent?
Yeah, we don't have to be dicks, do we? We might well be irked by another's behaviour, but I don't think in making them feel worse about it, we're doing anyone any favours. We might be getting something off of our chest and we might walk away from that and feel egotistically elated and better than that person. But in doing so, what we might end up doing as a consequence is making them feel equally shit. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's helpful in the slightest. So we might go, look, we might have to agree to disagree, and perhaps this isn't going to serve either of us anymore. And it might be worth... you can kind of hear an awful lot of intimate relationship crossover here as well, can't you?
Yeah.
That maybe we're better walking away from this. Maybe it's going to serve us better if this is just left to whatever it might become. And we might come full circle on this.
We may.
But for now, what I feel will be helpful is just a bit of time and air and space between us for us to perhaps go away and think about what might come from this opportunity here.
That is definitely a way to take a mature approach to a divergent path. And I've been in those situations where I've had to be honest to say, this is not about you, because that would simply be projection. This is absolutely about where I'm at the moment. And for the health of us both, separately, I need to step away from this. And it may be that that's for a period of time, or that might be that it's forever, but I need to go and do some work. Because the way that I'm reacting is something that I need to go and manage. It's not necessarily on the other person to change that behavior. It diffuses the toxicity, or at least the heat. To your point, we need to take a moment. The moment might be months, years. The pendulum may also swing back at another time. We might find a different edge against which we can meet, or circumstances can change. But it may be that is a decision to part. I'd add to that in that situation, what I've learned to do more recently is to then flood that with love. And I'll give you a practical example. And this is related to an intimate relationship. When my ex-wife and I divorced, it was particularly difficult for many, many years. But subsequently, I said to her that what I'd done is, as if it were a film shot on celluloid, I had edited out all the bad bits, and I was left with a very short film. But those 5 minutes were pure and wonderful, and our children were born out of that. And there were many, many positive experiences. There were more that were less positive, but I edited out all the good bits and made a really short film. And I can do that with those relationships too. I can choose to flood them with love, to say there were many aspects of this that momentarily were really positive, and that this person is lovable, that they are a positive person, that they will have many relationships where punctuality is not an issue for anybody, and that they are fundamentally good, but our interaction had to come to an end. And in that way, I think it helps cauterize the wound.
It's very easy, isn't it, to just bundle everything in as being that person is bad. They are just an awful person. They're not an awful person. They might just be going through a really shitty period of time. And at that time, having a better boundary reinstated is going to be far more beneficial for all.
Or we might be going through a shitty time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like sift through the shit.
Yeah.
Find the gold, even in a passing relationship. And it might be that at some point that can germinate into a new relationship or an evolved relationship. Or it may not. But choose to edit out the crap and not to identify that person as bad, but to identify the end of the relationship as necessary.
It's really wholesome. And that ability to pivot, that ability to look at something from a different point of view is absolutely gold. I can really feel the value in that. We're not telling everyone to get rid of all their friends here, are we?
No, not at all. First of all, I think that many of relationships are going to be extremely positive in every orbit.
Yeah.
From close friendships through to deal friends, through to these sort of tribes that we're a part of. There'll be many, many positive interactions. And some relationships will go through bumpy patches, right? And the better that we can learn to communicate with one another and go, okay, this was really hard, but I want to move through it with you, the stronger that we're going to be. I think that's definitely true. So no, we're not asking people to sort of make a list of their 180 friends and then wholesale put them all to the sword.
Yeah.
But similarly, you don't have to stay in a toxic relationship. You can either try to address it with positive communication, or you can work to walk away and then just hope that you're able to end that in a positive way.
Because ultimately men are going through a challenging time with relationships at the moment, and the message that we want to give is it's important to have human connection. It's important to have friendships in your life if that's available to you. There are ways of working through them and changing a relationship to work for you, but that sometimes means not sometimes. That will mean being honest with ourselves and being honest with that person that we consider a friend. If we want that to last, and to the poem that you gave a nod to last week that I forwarded ahead of our last podcast, David White on friendship, those friendships can last through battles and through scarification, and we can come out even stronger and better and more versed from that relationship through forgiveness. Through realizing actually there is a greater benefit from that relationship that we both appreciate and we both feel buoyed by. That's gold. That is worth the investment. And sometimes we have to go through the shit in order to come out the other side stronger from that as well.
Absolutely. To tether yourself to the reason that you fell into friendship with that person. And if that is still true, maybe it's possible to hold on to that as you take the difficult path through conversation and forgiveness. There will be many relationships which will be honed and turned into valuable diamonds because they're put under extreme pressure, and they'll be the better for it over the longer term. So there are some which we will have to let go, but there are some that will be enduring because we've learnt to forgive.
So in the next podcast, we're going to start to look at how to really culture a relationship to get the most out of that particular friendship.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to be on time for that.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'll try and be less of a dick next time.
I'll see you in the clearing.
So where can people reach out and find us, Matt?
Please subscribe to the podcast. Thank you for listening today. It's brilliant if you just click subscribe. We can then tell you when we've launched another podcast. Secondly, you can come to our website. There's lots of interesting stuff there, events that we do, content that we write, information about the podcast, where you can meet us. So please come there and subscribe. We promise not to spam you. If LinkedIn's your thing, then both Karl and I have LinkedIn pages and the clearing is there. And finally, if you'd like more visual content like Reels, then you can see us on Instagram. If you'd like to email us, email matt@theclearing.life. Same URL as the website, matt@theclearing.life, and we promise to try to answer.
I'll put all the links to all of what we've just mentioned beneath the description of this podcast.
We'll see you in the clearing. Thanks, Karl.
Thanks, Matt.